Hello and welcome to Gaming Chat, the podcast where we invite members of the gaming community to join us to play their favourite multiplayer games whilst telling us about themselves and why they love these games so much, and members of the gaming industry to talk about games they have worked on. I am your host, Mike, and I am joined today by Nick Cellini of Turtle Flip Studio. So, Nick, please say hello.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome, buddy. Thank you for joining us today. And here we are to talk about your game, Which Way Up? Galaxy Games, which is coming to the Nintendo Switch and other platforms. So before we start talking about what platforms it is coming to, because that is one of the questions I have lined up for you, we're going to start with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with Turtle Flip Studio?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm the director of the game. It's kind of been my baby for about 3 years now. I started by prototyping an idea just spawned off Mario Galaxy. I wanted to basically just play around with the gravity mechanics and make something in 2D in my game engine. And after I did that for a while, I got excited to keep going. I've always loved party games. A good friend of mine made the game Boomerang Fu, and I did some level design on that. And so I was kind of inspired, I think, from that game and having seen it in its development to make something similar. I always love taking games to events like PAX and other playtesting events, and I think party games and co-op games and couch games always do quite well in those kinds of environments and events, and so it's quite fun to do that playtesting. And so yeah, it's been a really fun experience developing it, and we're getting close to release now, which is scary and exciting.
I can only imagine. I mean, especially when, you've been working on this for, so long, and then it's finally coming to that point where it will be out there in the public and you think, oh, please be well received. Please be well received. Mind you, as I always like to say, is that any feedback is positive, even if it's negative, because it means if there are issues and anything that you need to fix or be aware of, you can make it happen. It's like, okay, we wasn't aware of this issue, but, we can work on it and, get it sorted. So
yeah, definitely. And I think I've taken this whole experience or development of this game as a learning experience for myself, and kind of I was lucky enough to get a grant from Screen Australia, a government body that gives grants in Australia, and yeah, it's enabled me to be able to hire a small team for a short period of time to work on the game. So I learned a lot from the experience of managing people to make a game, and the pitfalls that you can fall into, and all the ways that I would do things differently if I were to do it again. So it's definitely been a level up since the last project that I've worked on, and it's gotten me excited about future projects and how I would do them differently.
Brilliant stuff. So, I mean, we've already covered this, but to just highlight again, in what capacity are you involved with Which Way Up Galaxy Games?
Yeah, so I'm the director. So I started programming it. I was the designer and the programmer, but pretty much everything. As an indie dev, I started off on my own. I did everything on my own for, I guess, part-time, since I was working as a contractor when I started the project. And then I was just, showing it to friends, taking it to events. In Sydney, Australia, we have an event called Beer and Pixels, and I would take it there, show it off to a bunch of game developers and students there, and get their feedback. And it would just be a process of iteration where I'd take it there, test it, find bugs, get feedback, make changes, and it's a once a month thing. So it was a good kind of schedule for me, and yeah, once I got it to a certain stage, I was lucky enough to get this grant after I submitted for it a few times, and yeah, I guess I became a director after I was just calling myself a developer, and I hired a small team, and we've got a concept artist, Sydney, a 3D artist, Adam. That was kind of the core team for a while. And then I got a composer called Memo Demo to help with the music. They've got a pretty cool library of songs on SoundCloud that I found, and I kind of got in contact with them. And yeah, after that, we ramped up a little bit for a short space of time, maybe 6 months. And I had a few programmers join the team. And yeah, we've had some help with a few other friends here and there, friends and colleagues from the community, the game dev community in Sydney. And yeah, it's kind of whittled down back to mostly me near the end, where I'm just kind of polishing things off and patching little bugs that we're finding and doing all the necessary finishing touches before release.
Okay, so how did Turtle Flip Studio first come about? So let's talk about the studio itself now. So how did you decide to, go into creating your own studio?
Well, I was kind of a sole trader before I decided to make a studio, and I've worked on a game. I've released a small game before this, which is a very different kind of game. It's called Ashy Lake of Light, and it's a little minimalist puzzle game. And in the game, you kind of control or guide a little firefly to fly around these lanterns on a serene lake at night. And they have to orbit around these lanterns, and then finally end up in this gate at the end. And then there are little puzzles, so you solve a puzzle, move on to the next one. That was, I guess, the first game that I released on my own, and that I released that as a sole trader. And the reason I decided to start a company, Total Flip Studio, was essentially because of the grant process. To get a grant from Screen Australia, or the ones that we were going for, you have to apply as a company. And it was a really amazing process because it kind of taught me a lot through the application process about the marketing that's involved in games. And I think a lot of indie developers fall into this this trap where they think too much about making the perfect game, or like just focusing on the game, and they don't think about the marketing. Like, you don't consider the audience that you want to hit. You don't consider what genre is going to work for that audience, or you don't consider how long it's going to take to develop things, and all those things kind of a lot of the time, at least for me, are things that you learn by making mistakes, doing the wrong thing, where you try to do too much and it doesn't work. So yeah, and I guess the process of going through this grant has really led me to be more and more motivated to try to release more games as an indie studio, as Turtle Flip Studio. I think it's been an amazing journey, and I want to keep making games actually in the same universe if I can, with the same little characters that we've developed for this world. And not necessarily the same 2D platformer, but just taking those characters, doing something else, probably in space though.
Well, I suppose, if you can get hold of a grant, especially in your case, because I know a lot of people, they do try to do like crowdfunding as well, and you really are splitting your time then from developing the game and then trying to keep the Kickstarter campaign going, and trying to get people involved and interested. And I suppose being able to get a grant, especially from a government body, or a local town hall or whatever, to be able to fund the game, it takes a little bit of that pressure off, I suppose, so that you can focus on the real important thing, which is actually developing the game.
Yeah, definitely. It is very helpful, and I think, well, in the case of this grant, they really help you think about and target what you're working on, because you have to fill in all sorts of forms about your planning. What's your marketing plan? What's your budget? Tell us about the team members. What are your contingencies? Things like that.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of, just that thinking process is very important and useful, actually. That things definitely change, but at least you kind of get that way of thinking to get it started. But it's very, the transition, I think, from working on my own, for instance, to working with a team is very, very different and very interesting, because usually on your own you're doing everything yourself. Maybe we do actually have a marketing manager, Alex from Indie XP, and he does an amazing job. with our socials, but a lot of indie devs on their own will be, posting content or streaming themselves, doing the programming, doing the art. But when you step into more of a role where you're in a team and you're more of a director or a manager, then it's very different. It's a different skill set. You can do all those things that I mentioned on your own, and you can be very introverted, and just even though it's hard to diversify, art is very different to programming, but
Yes.
there's still kind of things that you can do as an introvert, for instance, that require a lot of focus, but that is a very distinct area from a director role or a management role, where it becomes very much about people. Still, you need to know about, obviously the direction of the game, where it should go, how you're responding to problems and changes. But yeah, that's been a very interesting process for me, and it's been very fun, and like it's really taught me that it's really great and important, really, to like lean on people who are very talented at the things that they do well. Because I guess an example is just me being maybe I'm a better programmer than I am an artist. And maybe I could model a 3D artwork or character, but it would take me so much longer to do than someone who's actually experienced and is just doing amazing work. I would take 3 times as long, and the product would be so much worse probably than someone who's just so focused on doing that one thing. So I think in game design especially, it's so important to find like kind of like-minded people that enjoy doing this, and there are so many of them that are amazing at what they do. So that's been really cool
It's
to
the
work
key
with.
elements of having a team as well. I mean, like I said, if you've got somebody who is more, focused on like game design, and then you've got somebody who's more on the art, prospects, and then like music. And even if you are wearing, all these hats and you can do it all yourself, I mean, if you've got somebody who's more, what their strengths are, where their strengths lie, and if they can do a much better job than you ever could, or you could, like you said, you could do probably exactly the same. It might take you that much longer to do it, but it's also the perspective that you get from other people as well. Now, like as a single, like sole developer, and this is not to discredit sole developers, there are so many indie games out there that have been created by a single developer, and they're absolutely amazing because they stuck to their vision and went for it. And a lot of the times it does pay off, and sometimes it doesn't pay off as much. But at least with a collective, you get these different ideas and perspective. I mean, an artist is never really appreciated until like after the fact kind of thing. But if you're getting that perspective, you can decide, oh, actually, if somebody else likes this idea, then maybe the audience will like that idea as well.
That's a really good point. Also, just I guess not being in an echo chamber, not just sitting in your basement making your game and then getting your own opinion. That's certainly a reason why playtesting is important, but you can't playtest all the time. And it's so good to be able to kind of just lean over, if you're in a physical space, I guess, lean over and say, hey, what do you think about doing X, Y, and Z? Like, why don't we try this level design idea? Like, it's weird, it might not work, but shall we try it? And they'll be like, oh, that probably not, why don't we try something else? And then you're suddenly, it's kind of more efficient, because you might get there a month later after playtesting it and finding that people don't love it anyway. And so it's like, yeah, you're so right. It's really cool to, I think for me especially, I've found that I can get too attached to ideas sometimes, where I'll come up with something, you get shower thoughts or whatever. You're like, oh, that's a great idea. I love that idea, so I'm going to do it. And then you kind of, sometimes there's a niggly thought at the back of your head where you're like, it might not work though. You think about it later, but then you're still so attached to it, and so it's like hard to disconnect. And it's just so helpful to tell someone and then just watch their reaction. Say, they weren't that excited about it, and even if they're not being honest, like people are better or worse at giving feedback. Like it's really great as a game developer to have friends and colleagues that will give feedback. Well, I guess, like
Yeah.
not too much, not too little, not too offensive. I suppose that can be a hard part, and it's hard. It can be hard not to take things to heart, like getting feedback and not being offended or anything like that.
Oh, I mean, there are many different ways of saying, what it is that you want to say, kind of thing. I mean, if somebody's not overly excited about the idea and they go, well, yeah, that sounds interesting, and you think, yeah, you're not really vibing with it, so maybe it's not as great as I thought the idea was. Or if somebody's, like overexcited and go, oh, yeah, you should definitely do that, and you think, are you being false with me right now?
Yeah,
That might
that's
be a
very
bit
true
too
too.
much, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's like, kind of like reading between the lines with some people. I mean, and normally with like fan feedback and like you said with like PAX and having people trying your games or beer and pixels, and then people can be brutally honest with you and say, do you know what, that bit was fun, but I wasn't really getting that other section and things like that. And you think, okay, maybe they got a point there, because if you hear one person saying, you think, okay, that's fine, fair enough. But if you hear like 5 or 6 people sort of like resonating the same thing, and you think maybe they got a point there.
Yeah, no, you're totally right because there's the difference between getting feedback from other game developers and then there's getting feedback from playtesters. A lot of game developer friends of mine kind of won't listen to feedback from playtesters. They prefer to just watch them and then generate their own kind of feedback based on how they've interacted with the game, or maybe they give feedback, but it's like a half listening thing. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, you had a problem with this point. There was friction at this moment, and then the playtester will say, oh, maybe you could fix that by like adding a new ability, something. And the game developer's like, no, we're not going to add a new ability, but yes, there was friction, because
yeah,
there are so many different outcomes to worry about. And one of the biggest things is like scope creep, like adding more features to fix problems, and
yes,
that's one that it's easy to fall into, especially if you're excited about a new idea. But I think that's certainly something that playtesters who aren't game developers will be attracted to. Is like, oh, have you thought about adding this feature that will take 3 months to develop? And that's how I hear it, obviously.
exactly. Yeah, you say, well, that's going to set me back a few months. But I mean, a lot of people are saying a similar sort of thing. Now, I mean, I'm not a game developer myself. I have played a lot of games. I've reviewed a lot of games. But I have been to a lot of events, and one of the hardest things that game developers have at these kind of events is getting people to come and play the game. Now, if somebody's taken that opportunity and thought, do you know what, I'm going to play this game. It looks interesting to me. That's the first part done, and now you have to try and capture them, keep them playing, keep them interested. So, they're already partially invested in your game, because I have been to other events where people just walk past the game and they look at the artwork and think, it's not for me, and keep going. So the moment they're sitting in that chair playing that game, and you think, okay, right, so, it's got something that's captured this person. Now, how do I keep them, interested? And then their opinion becomes a lot more valid in a way, because they've decided to give up their time and play your game, and you think, hey, this is actually quite fun, I like this platforming area, but maybe this could be done here a little bit, and you take note of that, and then somebody else comes along and plays, and then maybe they'll say something else, and basically once you got like 10-20 different people coming to play your game, and if like every single person says a slightly different thing, well then you think, okay, well then generally the game is all right. If you've got a lot of people coming and saying the same thing, well, this platforming section is really, really hard, maybe you should put another platform in, or like you were saying about another ability, then you think, maybe I need to take that into account, or maybe I need to make, maybe not so much the feature of adding a new ability, but maybe changing the level design a little bit to make it a little bit easier for them to progress that part. So
Yeah,
it does help in a lot of ways. And another beauty of it is because like a game developer will play a game and he'll play the game as it's intended. So it's like, okay, a platforming game, for example. Okay, so I've got to go here, I've got to collect this power up, and then I've got to go over to the next part, jump over the platforms. Okay. And then you'll get a casual gamer or a hardcore gamer or whatever who's not a game developer come along, and then he'll find a bug within a second that you didn't even know was possible in your game or was even there, because they've just done this really, really random thing. And then trying to replicate that becomes a nightmare as well. And you think, okay, well, how did you find that? Because, I've tried it, this person's tried it, as other developers tried it, not experienced that bug at all. And then you come along and just boom, 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 oh, there it is. So
Yeah, you're so right. In both situations, it's definitely about the repeated feedback, and you get a lot of thoughts. It's quite draining going to these events and listening to people and talking to them. And there's a lot of information rummaging around in your head, not rummaging around, floating around, and it's actually very difficult to get to sleep after one of these events because you're just thinking about so many things. But it's good to let things float to the top, like you said, when they've been repeated many times. And that's pretty much the best way to do things at the very least, because people have, you're saying all the right things. People have very different ways to play games, and they'll do things very differently. And some people will, it's great. I love meeting all the people at these kinds of events, and that they have such unique perspectives. And some people will zoom into this really specific element, idea, and really just want to talk about that thing, infinitely. And other people will just kind of get stuck at the beginning and won't be able to progress anywhere. And so it's like, worlds apart. But and you kind of have to maybe not ignore, but I guess especially as an indie dev, for me at least, I just can't do everything. Like I still have a huge backlog of tasks that I want to get through, but we had to set a release date and just finish the project. So we've written down heaps of notes from playtesting, but if they don't kind of bubble up based on repeated feedback, then they just kind of get lost in the backlogs until maybe we get time to fix something in the future.
But then it's like you said, you put that on the back burner, for example, and you think, okay, well, we can't sort that out right now. We can't implement that right now. But once the game is, out there and more people are playing it, I mean, for example, if it's on Steam and stuff like that, I know a lot of people leave Steam reviews, user reviews on Steam, and then you get more feedback. And if you hear more people reiterating that same thing, saying, oh, this would be really good if that happened, and you think, okay, well, then maybe I'll consider that for another patch. And then, okay, well, I did have these other ideas, but if this is the one that's more important to people, maybe I'll work on that and then I'll do the other patch slightly after or whatnot. So let's get back to the game itself, right, with Which Way Up, Galaxy Games. Now, you've taken heavy inspiration from Super Mario Galaxy, and you said about, using the gravity mechanic and stuff like that. So what really was the inspiration? Why did you take inspiration from Super Mario Galaxy for that?
I think it was just a moment when I was watching a YouTube video by this content creator called Jasper, Jasper. I think they do kind of they open up ROMs, maybe game dev content, and their video was kind of exploring how gravity was implemented in Super Mario Galaxy. And so I was watching that, and I was just fascinated, to be honest, about how those systems worked. And I've always just loved Mario Galaxy. I've played it a bunch of times, and it really kind of sprouted from an obsession of me wanting to understand and learn how to do something. And so, I just jumped into Unity, which is a game development platform or engine.
Yep.
And I kind of tried implementing just in 2D because I guess my values for design are trying to keep things as accessible as possible. And so my perspective on Mario Galaxy is that I love it as a game, but I guess I've seen other people play it. And even while I'm playing it, it is a difficult game to get your head around spatially sometimes. Yes. And I think the reason I love it so much is just because I can kind of just play the game and kind of have these moments of breaking it, where I don't know if I would call them glitches, but moments where the camera will transition in a very bad way, or you can kind of break gravity in a way, or like perform some weird acrobatics that feel like they're not intentional. And I feel like that's kind of the thing that I like so much about it, is that it feels so much like it's off the rails. There are so many unintended or unpredictable things that the developers couldn't really control for, because the problem space, or the like movement space, is so large. Yeah, so that's kind of, I think, where the interest came from. And yeah, I just wanted to make something that felt good. I really love game feel, and trying to create something where you could experience some sort of flow state, or like, yeah, I'm obsessed with kind of, I loved Tony Hawk when I was young. I love the feel of that game. I love any flying games. I love to see how they've implemented things, or gliding, or swimming. So yeah, I think that obsession is what spawned it. And then it was about, what do I do with that core mechanic after I kind of created a prototype that felt fun enough for me to keep playing around with, and for other people that I've shown to kind of play with. And I think it's very important for the developer, or like for me, for instance, to kind of enjoy the thing that I'm making. It really helps with motivation, because you need a lot of motivation to do this. I think indie games require a lot of time if you don't have the funding, the time. I guess you need time, but it's more so the funding, because you sink a lot of hours of your own time just to make this thing. So it has to be a passion. It has to be something that you enjoy, and I guess are obsessed with in some way, I think.
It takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a lot of resolve. I mean, I've done a good number of interviews with game developers and that, and it's very much the same. I'm even back in like guys who worked at Rare in the good old days of Rare, and they said exactly the same thing. They'd be, working overtime, but for the love of it. They'd hardly see their family or whatever, because they'll be working from sun up to sundown, and just working on games like GoldenEye and Banjo Kazooie, but for the absolute love and the passion that they had for those games. Because obviously, I mean, if the money's there as well, that's fantastic, but money's not everything at the end of the day. But if there's a game that you're just really not feeling it, I mean, it starts off and you think, oh, this is a good idea, and then you get to a few months in and you think, oof, this is a slug now. Once that kicks in, it's very, very difficult to get out of that mindset. And it's like, I just want this done. I just want this done. No. I mean, you got to have that passion there for, game development. And it is something that, real game developers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's like, if you don't have that passion there, it's like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, that's a
Hats
really
off to you all. Hats off to you all, I must say.
it's a very interesting concept, to be honest, because especially with teams, I think, because I think that passion, to kind of drill down into every aspect of the game and make it as good as it can be, it is hard to come across, I suppose, with all members of the team, I suppose, necessarily. And since it's my baby, it's easier for me. But you bring other people into the project, maybe they don't have exactly the same kind of motivation. I'm not trying to point fingers at all. I'm just saying, like, I can imagine some of the games that have come out. I love Banjo Kazooie. It's one of my favorite games. And I would imagine that team would have had, they would probably have had amazing, dynamics with each other. Everyone would have been super excited to make the game, because you can feel it in the final product. It's just like this work of art that's transcended kind of the years, I suppose. And it's hard to replicate that, like that level design, and the mechanics that they implemented in the feel. For some reason, it's not easy to reproduce, at least not that I've seen in a long time. So
no, I mean, so many people have tried over the years, haven't they? And they're just not captured like the same essence. And it's a shame, but sometimes, I mean, when you create a game, it has to be, I mean, you can take inspiration from other games, but you have to make it your own. I think that's what helps a game really, really stand out. It has to be your own. I mean, that's why like Shovel Knight did so well. That's why Celeste did so well, and there's many other games. They did well because they took inspiration from other games, but they made it their own. And if you just try to make an imitation, we know there is so many like shovelware games out there or asset flips, and they just don't have the same essence that the original games have. So if you can create something original, and it can use as many the mechanics from the games that it's inspired by, but as long as it has its own feel of it, and it's not just this is just a carbon copy. So
yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and I hope that our game is is going in that direction. But it's kind of like a North Star, something that I aspire to make for sure.
So, can you give us a brief overview of Which Way Up, Galaxy Games? What kind of game is it, and what is it about?
So the game is about essentially this nostalgic feel of playing a local multiplayer game on a couch with your friends, your siblings, your parents, and trying to compete with each other in a series of, in this case, a series of mini games. But the core feeling is this nostalgic local experience, and I guess the goal has always been to create this unique platforming feel with the gravity. And it's not only platforming. Some of our mini games have other kind of control mechanics, but most of them are the gravity platforming. So examples are, we also have kind of mini golf in space. So it's, a lot of people refer to Angry Birds in Space, I think it might be called. It's similar to that, where you're all kind of shooting little golf balls off and trying to get them into the hole at the same time, and you have to hit the right orbit to get it to go around, and then kind of move on to the next hole. And whoever can kind of sink the most hole-in-ones wins that round. We also have something like a knockout mini game called Bumper Stars, where you're all in a little bubble orbiting around a star, and as the camera tracks you, you're all trying to knock each other out of the camera's view off screen with this little dash mechanic. And then there are a few other non-platforming mechanics. One of them is also kind of a hybrid between Bumper Stars and another one, but it's kind of like a boss level, where one person gets to jump into this boss character, and you get to go around eating planets and eating other characters. Taking a step back, it's a game of mini games. So we have 12 mini games, and those are the Galaxy games that you're playing, kind of like the Olympic Games or the Commonwealth Games we have in Australia. And so you're just doing, you can, as you set up your game, you can either choose to do a party mode, like a party cup it's called, and then you do like first to win 5 mini games is the winner, and then you finish the game, you get little rewards, like jumped on the most heads, died the most, cute little things like that. Or you can choose to play one specific mini game and then customize how that game goes a little bit. So one of my favorite mini games is kind of inspired by soccer. It's called Comet Collect. It's kind of like scoring own goals in soccer. So there are multiple little balls all around the map, and you're trying to use the little it's kind of like a sneeze. People have called it a sneeze. You have this ability to kind of push objects away from you. You charge up and you push, so you can kind of direct the balls into your own goal and collect as many as you can, or score as many as you can. And that's one of my favorites to kind of replay and customize, because there's a little bit of a magnetism mechanic which I added the ability to turn off. So it's an assist, it helps with the ball go into the goal. But I originally liked the game without that assist, kind of hard mode, so I like to turn it off. That's essentially the experience.
Okay. Now, as you said, earlier about like level design and stuff like that. What is your process on character and level designs?
Good question. Two different questions, I guess. Well, character design. Not that our characters don't have any special abilities, but we tried to. One thing to think about was that we wanted their silhouettes to be somewhat unique, so people wouldn't lose their character on screen. We tried our best to do that. So we have different colored characters, but we also try to keep their silhouettes different. I happen to have a few of the characters here in little crochet mode. This is Sprout, and this is Luna.
Nice.
I have Sprout's ears on my
Sprout
headphones
ears.
as well.
For those who are listening and watching this, Nick does have like Sprout ears on his headphones, which won't be able to see in this video. But I just thought, for those who are watching and listening, for a little bit of context. And he's also got a couple of like plushies, like are they woolen plushies, basically knitted?
Yeah, they're crocheted.
Crocheted. Very cool.
Yeah, so for example, I guess, we tried to kind of keep their silhouette. So the leaves on Sprout's head kind of alters the silhouette a little bit, and Luna is one of the simplest characters, but that was essentially what we tried to do with the character design, keep them unique. And we have these kind of resources in the mini games. We call them pips. They kind of look like this. So there's a mini game called Nebula Nab, and there are little grey circles around the map, and you have to go collect them, and then they transform into the relevant character's kind of energy resource. And so Luna will kind of collect this, and then the pip will follow you around until you drop it off into this little central area on the map. And so all of those elements as well, we tried to kind of keep their silhouettes pretty unique as well. So yeah, that's the character design elements that we thought about. In terms of level design, every level design process that we thought through was pretty unique to the minigame, I think, which was a really fun element of that process. So for example, one minigame is kind of like a King of the Hill situation. It's called Star Ring, and so there's this circle moving around the map slowly, and you have to just stay in the circle, and when you stay in it, it just charges your score bar up, and as soon as the timer runs out, whoever's charged up the most, or whoever gets to 100% first, is the winner of that round. And so I guess the mechanics and the rules of that minigame affect the level design. So we tried to kind of have more spaces or more kind of planets for the ring to kind of go on either side of. So you can have lots of points where you're choosing as a player to kind of jump between that ring. So there are lots of moments where the ring will not be close to any ground, and so you really do have to like platform around and go, I can't reach it now, so I have to go around this way, or you have to choose to go another way. And so it's kind of trying to encourage decision making about how you're platforming and how you're interacting with other characters. And you try to think about what you want that experience to feel like, and then you design the levels. So what we wanted for that minigame, this King of the Hill feeling, was to kind of encourage players to be really tight, close to each other, obviously, because we all start trying to stay in this ring, and what that induces is kind of like this. It's almost like a Super Smash. It's like the most Super Smash Brothers like mini game that we have, because everyone's just like get out, and you're all just hitting each other with your only combat ability. And if you happen to get a good hit in, like it's the most charged up, and you're directing people away from the map, you can hit people off the map, and they'll kind of pop out of screen, and they'll have to respawn. So that's kind of what we wanted that mini game to feel like. And yeah, so other mini games feel very different as well. There's like a bomb tag mini game where I just wanted a lot of the planets to feel pretty small, so a lot of jumping there is what I wanted. There are a lot of moments where you want to just chase another player, and characters will just kind of chase each other around the same planet for a while, but the player with the bomb can run a little bit faster. So it's kind of like they're catching up, and then they'll jump around. And we ended up enclosing that map with these pieces of jelly, I guess space jelly, so that when people are jumping, they just kind of bounce right back. So you have to be careful when you're jumping away from players, because there's this, well, we discovered through play testing that a lot of people would kind of chase, and then when the bomb character gets close enough, then you kind of jump over them. But you have to be careful when you're jumping not to kind of hit some jelly and then bounce back into them. So it's like
and take the bomb.
yeah, exactly. That's one of my favorite mini games as well. That can lead to a lot of shouting sometimes. So yeah, I think it's been very fun to create a game of mini games, because we can end up creating a lot of different level design feels, just based on the experience that we want players to create with each other. And so yeah.
Now, one of the games that you previously worked on, as you mentioned before, was Boomerang Fu. How did Which Way Up Galaxy Games differ from Boomerang Fu in terms of your work on both games, and how did it influence your game now?
Well, I didn't have a huge role in Boomerang Fu. I was, I guess, always there I was always watching from the sidelines. I was giving lots of feedback, which wasn't necessarily taken, or some of it was, but I was lucky enough that my friend who created the game got me on board at some stage to do some level design for a bunch of the levels. So I think maybe somewhere close to half of the levels of the base game were levels that I kind of came up with and then worked together with the developer to kind of refine. So yeah, that was my contribution to Boomerang Fu, and that process was it was really great learning experience. I think probably a similar. Well, it was it was different, because what we're doing in Which Way Up is kind of level design based on mini games, whereas in Boomerang Fu, our goal is to kind of take a game which uses very similar mechanics in every level, I suppose, which is a kind of this combat mechanic based on the boomerang coming back and slicing other players in melee, and kind of utilize other mechanics such as doors or moving platforms, or teleporters or other things like that, to create as many different unique levels as possible. And that's certainly the case in Which Way Up within mini games, but it doesn't diverge as much, because the mini games don't repeat as much as that kind of core gameplay experience, I guess, in Boomerang Fu. So yeah, it was interesting and tough to kind of really get into the weeds of thinking about the shapes of the level designs and the kind of ricochet lines and reflection lines of where the boomerangs might go, how some of the spaces in the levels would create like choke points, or how lots of players would kind of tend towards a certain area in the map, or if players were always falling off the map over here. So it was different. In Which Way Up, since it's a gravity environment, it's much harder to fall off the screen, I would say, because you're never really falling off a platform. Pretty much all platforms lead to the ground. So in a sense, it's got a very different design style to it, and so the levels have to have very different thought process that go through them. But yeah, I suppose the ways that it's different are probably more centric around the fact that they're unique mini games, I guess, would be the best answer I can give to that.
So now, Which Way Up Galaxy Games features both a single player and local multiplayer for up to 4 players. Was online multiplayer ever considered? And is there a
Yeah,
possibility of it being added in the future?
yeah, it was considered very strongly. It's one of our biggest pieces of feedback that we get for sure. And I always wanted to add online multiplayer. It was always the plan, I suppose. And yes, I'd love to add it, but that will all depend on how it's received, how it goes, and I can justify adding it. But essentially, online multiplayer is difficult, especially in a real time game. So, as an indie developer who doesn't necessarily have the resources to allocate, not only to developing that feature but ongoing to maintain, if it has dedicated servers, maintain those servers, pay for them, or to kind of guarantee a quality of service over time. So we were looking into making the game like a peer-to-peer multiplayer, so you could connect with your friends. And yeah, we did a bunch of prototyping on it, and we ended up just saying, we have to, basically, with the budget that we have and the time we have, we'd have to decide between, I guess, doing that or adding like the remaining 4 mini games and single player or whatever else it was. To be honest, I can't remember exactly what the decision tree was, but yeah, it was a hard decision. But the thing was, I guess with a game like this, and the fact that we are a small team and this is one of my first games, I just didn't know if it was worth putting in the time and resources to this feature if the game isn't necessarily going to be a huge success. The feature of online multiplayer, it's kind of this differentiator that can potentially lead to viral growth, I suppose. Yes. It can make a game a lot more popular, but if that wasn't going to happen, say you make online multiplayer and you don't have that viral moment anyway, you will have invested like a lot of time,
resources,
money to add that feature, and it's just a hard decision to make, I guess, when you're not, a big studio.
Yeah, that is understandable. I do get it, and I can see why people would request it so much. And it is a double-edged sword, basically, when it comes to like online multiplayer. Because yeah, we'd all love to have online multiplayer in games, because obviously couch co-op. For people like me who grew up with couch co-op, I mean, it's still one of the best experiences ever. Sitting on the the couch playing with your friends, like playing Smash Bros or Mario Kart or like GoldenEye and stuff like that. And like somebody's doing better than you, and you can always just nudge them or push them and whatever physically, because you're getting irate that they're winning, and you lose that essence when it comes to online multiplayer. But because we are all so connected online now, it gives other opportunities to, play games with our friends and that. So we may not necessarily, have the opportunity to be able to play with them at home. Now, for example, I live in Spain. The rest of my family, they live in the UK. They've moved back to the UK a good few years ago. So when I do play with my brother, has to be through online. And a good number of people that I've met at gaming events and stuff like that as well, who've become very, very good friends of mine. Same again, we play a lot online. And like I said, the beauties of online multiplayer is being able to play with your friends online, and also playing with people. Like, for example, like I've got a number of friends who live in Australia as well. Then the hardest thing when it comes to that is finding the right time frame when it's I can play and they can play at the same time, because obviously I'll be having breakfast, they've just had dinner, so it's trying to find the time then.
Yeah,
And
I totally understand.
most importantly, resources, like you said. I mean, unless you get that big viral push. Now, if you decided, for example, like straight off, okay, we're going to do online multiplayer, we really want the game to have online multiplayer, and then like nobody plays it. Now you got a server that's dead and you have to pay off. It's all that time and resources that you've had to put into actually creating a stable multiplayer as well, because that's one of the other things. I mean, yeah, you can have online, and then it's like, is it stable enough?
Yes, exactly. I
So
mean,
I get it. I understand.
the biggest lesson I think that I learned from this is that if you want to have online multiplayer in a game, you should start the development with online multiplayer from the beginning of your prototyping. Like be prototyping in online frameworks in the programming that you're doing. It's like that was a mistake that I made and learned from, is to trying to add it after we had kind of developed this local experience. It's a huge headache, and it's not fun. And it kind of like, yeah, you have to kind of rip things apart and change things. You create all sorts of problems. And so it's not fun. But if I was to, create another prototype, I really thought it had legs, maybe it was a good idea. Like maybe after that initial prototype that I kind of put together really quickly was done, and I kind of proofed it, I showed it to people, and I thought, yeah, it's good. I could like go straight into bringing online into it and kind of develop it properly from there. I think that's what I would do in future. But it's still a hard decision to make, because you do have to commit to it, and it can change the feel of games, because on online frameworks they have constraints, like you have to add certain little allowances to fake like latency not being there. Great implementations of online, Rocket League or whatever, they've done amazing jobs to lead you to think that there is zero latency, but it's really just faking it so that we perceive there to be no latency.
It looks as fluid as possible. I suppose another possibility is mirroring, but you have to know how to, implement that and implement it well. So basically, one person, the host, is, obviously hosting the game, they're playing the game, and everybody else is basically just mirroring their screen, which is what they do for like the Nintendo Switch Online. So that when you're playing multiplayer, you're basically playing like a cloud version that you're in your home of somebody else's game. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
but
there are
it's
different ways to do
time,
it.
money, resources, and then even then, just getting it right. I mean, I suppose another possibility is making it like a standalone option later down the road. So you haven't got to actually change anything in your game per se, but you could make, like which way up online possible in the near future, for example. I mean, anything is possible. It's just seeing whether it is viable. That's the most important thing, whether it's viable.
Yeah, no,
So,
I mean, I would love to have the excuse to add any number of features if there was demand for it, or if I could justify it somehow. Online is very interesting. Like, there's so much to learn there from a development perspective, and I loved delving into it. And it's just a different way of thinking about programming. And like you said, there are so many different ways to do it. So many, they call them network topologies. Like I said, do we have dedicated servers, or is it peer-to-peer? Can I connect to my friends, or is there matchmaking? There's just so many little decisions to make like that, which are actually huge decisions, and they affect the gameplay experience so much. And like you said, if you implement online multiplayer and you don't do a great job, another point is that you risk getting bad reviews. Like you might be on like a moment where you're peaking, like you're about to peak in terms of viral.
Just
like
on
maybe
the crest, just on the crest, just there, yeah.
Maybe the servers all crash or something like that, and then you get very bad press. Or maybe like there are just moments where there are lots of people on the server, and then the latency gets bad for everyone. There's so many ways it can go wrong, and I think you need to be ready for that with live operations and people to kind of fix those problems. So it's a huge decision. Yeah.
That's understandable. I mean, I get it, and it's one of these like questions that you have to ask anyway as like an interviewer. Is that because you got a game, that's great. You got multiplayer, fantastic. Does it have online? Yeah, it's just it's you have to go through the process basically, and even though You know the answers, I know the answers, and you just have to, say it anyway. You just got to go with it,
The,
I'm
the
afraid. But
the thing we've been kind of saying to people, I guess, is to try Steam Remote Play if you're on Steam Remote Play
Mhm.
together, and that's a
Yeah,
feature that can work quite well. It
Mhm.
tends to work well if you are in the same like country or you're close to the friends that you're trying to play with, or you all have good internet connections. But when Steam Remote Play doesn't work, it really doesn't work. So it's like it works or it doesn't kind of thing.
yeah.
We recently tried something similar called Parsec, and we're thinking of recommending that more to people who ask about online multiplayer if they want to play through Steam. And we tested it, and I think it's probably a little bit more reliable than Steam Remote Play together. So yeah, it's a solution. It's not a great one, but yeah, it can work for a bunch of local multiplayer games. And yeah, especially if you're close to the friends that you're playing with, it's a pretty good solution.
Okay. And what about? I mean, this is obviously this isn't in my list of questions. I didn't think about this until afterwards. But bots, are bots a possibility for like multiplayer? For example, I play a lot of the games, single player experiences, and if I wanted to play like some multiplayer games, when obviously my girlfriend does play video games with me, but she's very much a Mario Party, Mario Kart, and very little else kind of thing. So there are some games that I'd really like to play, like the multiplayer. Um, and sometimes it helps having bots. Is that a possibility for which way up?
Yeah, like I said, I'd be open to adding bots in the future. It was just another decision making moment. I think it was even. I had a moment where I, I wanted to decide based on budgeting reasons between online multiplayer, single player, or adding bots. Those were the
Yeah.
three things that why I was going to do one of the three. And I guess if I was to rank them in terms of how hard or how much time they would take, it would be like online multiplayer, bots, and then single player. Single player did take quite a bit of work, so I don't really know in the end if I should have done bots or single player, and I'll never know. Uh, so yeah, I am like open to adding bots in a future update. I guess if it's something that a lot of players might ask for, but the tricky part, I guess, doing it in a multiplayer game versus, I guess, a game like Boomerang Fu, is just that the logic for each mini game for each bot, or for the bot in each mini game would just be different.
Yes.
Because yeah, each not all mini games are supremely different, but there are some like golf, for instance, where you're just standing there and you have to aim. So that's a completely different implementation where we have to, map out the trajectory of the ball so that the bot can decide where it needs to aim versus, you know, trying to knock out other players versus just running away from a black hole versus trying to score a goal. They're all like creating a different bot effectively, or like a different system
Well,
to
yes, I
of
suppose so,
decision
because like
making.
you got 12 mini games, and then you essentially have to create 20. Well, so you got 12, so it'd be 12 bots, and then even then they'd have to have slight variations to how well they play, or how
Yeah,
like
exactly. Difficulty
AI
as well.
implementation. So
Yeah,
yeah, I can see it being a hell of a lot of work as well. But same again. I mean, this is all just possibilities. There's nothing definite, but if there's enough fan feedback on it, and if the game is very much well received, maybe it could happen in a near update. Who knows?
yeah, that would be fun to implement for sure. I love all these excuses to do more work, to be honest.
So now you've already said we've got 12 different mini games, which are all fun in their own way, and have different aspects. Like you said, there's the King of the Hill or King of the Ring, basically. Then you got like your mini golf kind of thing. How will Turtle Flip Studio continue support the post-launch of the game with additional content and updates?
Yeah, well, one way we actually have like three little adventures in the single player mode, and an adventure is tied to one of the characters. So I think Sprout goes on a little hole-in-one adventure. So there's a bit of dialogue at the bottom of the screen as you at the beginning of playing golf, and the character kind of the idea is that all the other characters are kind of entrapped by this entity, or they're kind of taken over. They kind of becomes zombies, and you have to save them by playing golf or whatever it is. And so Sprout has 6 different levels in which they save all the other characters. So there are 6 levels for every adventure, and there are slots for all 7 characters to have an adventure, but we have only provided or created the content for 3 of the characters so far. And so the rest of that content is kind of like in a coming soon state. And so we'd love to bring that out as soon as we can, or when we can, if we can. It's kind of up in the air at the moment, to be honest. It all depends how things go. That's one piece of content we'd love to bring out, and we have a few different other ideas that we love to do. Like a lot of feedback we get are if the characters can have customization options. So we'd love to have some aesthetics customization on the character select screen. To have little outfits or hats, or things like that, to all the characters when you're setting them up. I think that would be quite fun, and then maybe you can unlock some of those after you play the game every time. And then, after that, there's also just more mini games. And we've got like a spreadsheet of ideas of just mini games that we came up with, and we also kind of have a few opportunities to work with a few different games that we like and that we've talked to. Other games, like other video games that are kind of launching at some stage in the future, I think. We're kind of thinking about maybe doing a cross promo where a mini game is somehow linked to another video game, it's IP. I thought that would be fun. I'm also I got excited about the Switch 2 announcement, and I've always loved the novelty of the different peripherals and hardware that Nintendo likes to release, and it got me thinking about the little mouse kind of hint that they've got in the Switch 2. So I was considering maybe a mini game that has a cursor somehow related to it. So maybe you are told to take out your Joy-Con and put it on a surface and then use it as a mouse or something. As one of the mini games. Yeah, or maybe something to do with.
Oh, actually, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think I thought it's an opportunity, since we have mini games, and especially with Mario Party, a lot of the mini games are quite novelty based in their design, where it's like, ooh, let's the designers are probably like, let's do a mini game where the player has to shake their controller the fastest or whatever, and then design something around that. So I thought that would be fun if we kind of take it from that angle as well, seeing as I think our game is hopefully designed best for that platform, for the Nintendo Switch. I think that's where a lot of players are playing local games on these days. So using their hardware and their peripherals in the ways that they're intended to, I think it could be really fun to make stuff like that. But we'll see. It's all dependent on all sorts of things.
Well, I do have a few more questions, but a lot of them that we've already answered throughout the podcast. Like you just touched upon, like ideas that you've got that you'd like to implement in the game, so we won't have to ask that. Comparing Which Way Up to other games in terms of like gameplay, overall theme, or story, what would you say is its closest match?
Wow. I guess. I mean, I have been inspired a lot by Boomerang Fu, so I think that just the round-based system of getting points is pretty close. I kind of have taken a few references from a game called Tricky Towers as well.
Yes.
Some of the kind of UI and UX, and I guess that kind of party atmosphere of doing a few rounds where the medals go up, and then you maybe go back and choose a different mini game, or you choose from the beginning to do only one style of mini game, something like that. Um, yeah, what other games? I like people. I guess people say Mario Party, but I don't really. I know that we are a game of mini games, and Mario Party is very much that. But I think Mario Party, for me, a lot of the mini games are, like I just said, more about novelty, and there is this meta of you being a board game and having these kind of RNG mechanics of like rolling the dice and kind of sabotaging your friends. So I don't think the experience is incredibly similar to Mario Party. To be honest, it's I think our game is more of a quick fix. Like I think Mario Party, you need to be prepared to invest the time to kind of sit down and be like, okay, we're going to play 45 minutes to an hour, or if you set it up correctly, I guess half an hour. But it's more of a long form. You've got to be patient. For me, at least, with Mario Party kind of experience. Whereas I think I kind of imagine our game to be more like you're playing a few party games with your friends on an evening. Like you'll boot up Bobble Battle, maybe you'll boot up Smash Bros, maybe you'll boot up Boomerang Fu, and then Which Way Up might be one of
Maybe a boot
those.
up. Yeah, which way out? Yeah.
It's like one of the many, hopefully. But I know everyone has their favorite games that they'll play for hours. I used to play
Oh yeah.
Smash Brothers constantly, and I've played heaps of Boomerang Fu as well. So yeah, it's hopefully that kind of just like really casual experience. And I've seen with playtesting some really nice moments of like parents playing with their kids when they're going around to these expos, and I think it's really nice that it can be enjoyed by a variety of people,
Mhm.
different skill levels. And I've seen like really young kids kind of pick it up and really beat their parents at the game, and that's kind of fun and satisfying to watch. Or kind of the other way around, where the parents may be going easy on them a little bit. And there have been some fun times where kids can get very competitive, and that maybe they're a bit of a sore loser, and they'll have a bit of a tantrum. That's been me when I was young as well. So I mean, yeah, hopefully it can attract a wide audience, and it's
I
kind
mean, the
of appeal.
beauty of new games is that both parents and children are basically on a like a level playing field, basically. Because like if you have your Smash Bros or your Mario Kart or your Call of Duty, for example, and like parents have been playing these games for years, so like when their kids come to play, it's like, well, you don't really have a chance. So if the parent is letting their kid win, or they just want to absolutely decimate the poor soul. When it comes to like new games, like you're on a level playing field, so the parents don't know what to expect or how to play the game, and the kid doesn't. But the kid might pick it up a lot quicker than the parent, and it's like, oh wait, you actually did beat me at something. Oh wow, I'm gonna have to get better at this.
Yeah, there's certainly that element because of our kind of different mini games. Like I play a lot with my girlfriend, and she will often beat me at mini game A, B, and C, and we'll get competitive because you can customize your rounds, and which mini games will come up, and we'll be like, okay, which ones are we going to play? And I'll always try to turn off the ones that she always beats me at, and vice versa.
Oh no,
So
they actually accidentally got turned off. I'm sorry.
yeah, and I'm always like, you're not allowed to beat the developer. I made this game, so please stop winning. This isn't right. It makes her very satisfied. That extra knowledge, I think.
Well, as we start to wrap up, would you be so kind to list all the platforms that you hope to release Which Way Up Galaxy Games on and the release date?
Yeah, so Which Way Up Galaxy Games is coming to the Nintendo Switch and Steam PC, Mac, and Linux on March 27, 2025, which is very soon from the recording date of now. So it might very well be out by the time this comes out. Who knows?
Well, as with all good things that must come to an end, so must this podcast. So thank you very much, Nick, for taking the time to talk with us. And I also want to give a shout out to Australia's finest, who've been working very, very hard throughout this podcast, because the amount of times I've heard sirens go past.
Oh, really?
So shout out to the Australian police who are working hard on this very, very warm day.
My apologies. I should turn the sensitivity of my microphone down.
Not a problem, mate. Not a problem. I mean, my brother did an interview with the president of Nihon Falcom a few months back, and it was in the middle of London as well. And same again, the police cars were just going backwards and forwards throughout the interview. And it's like, oh my word. But no, you can't help these things, mate. So it's not a problem. And I'd sooner be able to be hearing the sirens than not, because obviously
It's true.
it means
They're
they're doing
meant to be
something.
heard.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to have a shout out, let people know where they can find you, where they can find out more about Which Way Up Galaxy Games. The floor is yours, bud.
Yeah, I mean, if you are an owner of a Nintendo Switch, we'd love it for you to play our game there. I think that's where we want players to grab the game and play it the most. But if you're on Steam, check it out there. Give it a wish list. Buy it on March 27. It's going to be around $14.99 USD. So, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of sales as the year goes by. So yeah, if you can, support us little indie devs, you can help us to kind of make more games and grow, especially in Australia, where we're far away from the rest of the game development community. So yeah.
Brilliant. And any socials you would like to plug?
Yeah, Which Way Up Game on Instagram, TikTok, and X/Twitter, and Blue Sky. And thank you so much for having us, Mike. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Nick. And for everybody at home for watching and listening, thank you very much. And until next time, keep on gaming.